I want us to look at the book of Deuteronomy. The Israelites had survived their journey out of Egypt only to arrive at the promised land and face the temptations and the risk of all of this. You'd think that they had it made, and yet it looked as if they were going to fail. You would think our country has it made. You would think that our church has it made. You would think that any one of us has it made, but some of us are going to fail. This year, we will become casualties in the battle of the gods. Number one, you need to know the rules. If you're going to fight, if you're going to play a game, you need to know exactly what rules. And Christian living is no different than anything else. It comes with a set of rules. I don't always like the rules in football. I don't always like the rules in basketball. I don't understand the rules of soccer. I don't like the rules that come with the Christian life. But I'm on God's team. And God is the one who makes the rules. It says in verse 1, "Hear, O Israel, the decrees and laws I declare in your hearing today. Learn them and be sure to follow them." Now, the English translation has three active verbs here. God tells us exactly what we are to do. We are to hear His word. Hear, O Israel. The word basically means sit up. Listen. Notice what I'm about to say. God said, "Hear, Israel." Now, rules aren't necessarily always written down. For instance, if you drive from here up to the summit, there is not a sign there that says, "Do not drive your Jeep in the detention pond." But is that a rule? Absolutely. There are so many rules that are just implied by the fact that we are in community with one another. But God is talking here about some very specific rules that not only did He write them down, He carved them in stone. I remember one time taking a test on the Ten Commandments. I was in college, had a real conservative professor, and we could only read the King James. The test was, write the Ten Commandments with every comma and every period, every capitalization in place. It was a pass or fail. There were no ABCs. You either got it right or you missed it. I aced it. But I was the only one in the class that did. Guess what? God doesn't care whether or not you can write down the Ten Commandments and get every comma in place. Somewhere we must have decided it was easier to recite the Ten Commandments than to live by them. But the message that God sent to the Israelites was, listen and do exactly what I'm telling you to do. Learn them and be sure to follow them. Now, learning the Ten Commandments or learning anything from God, from His Word, is an interactive process. For instance, I can tell you how to change the oil in your car. But you will not be able to change the oil until you go out there and actually start to work on it. And then as you examine it, things that you have heard will start to fall into place. Our church rolls are filled with people, and this is going to be our January project. Our church rolls are filled with people who have, if you will, they have never changed the oil. They know what the Bible is. They know they ought to go to church. They believe in salvation. They believe the Lord's coming. You see, they have an intellectual grasp of the Ten Commandments, but they don't have an applicative experience. Jesus said more than just follow me, but it was, do as I do. Walk as I walk. I think one of the best illustrations of a person who exemplifies the typical church member today is the young ruler who came to Jesus, and he was so proud that he knew all the commandments and kept all the commandments. And Jesus said, then let's take it another level. Let's apply what you know. Go and minister to others. That's where he failed the test. Following God's word also means teaching others to do the same. It's the logical conclusion of faith. If you find something good, you share it with other people. So one of your obligations as a believer is to teach other people what you believe. You believe God's word. Therefore, you trust God. And the nature of a trust is that you receive something and you're to pass it along to someone else. So as a child of God or as a member of this church, you have a trust. God has entrusted you with something. And that something is the wonderful good news. At the risk of losing my job, folks, it is time that we step up to the plate. Reaching 10 lost people this year is not acceptable. Do you hear me? There is no magical number, but I know that 10 is not the number. Allowing people to stay home from church because it's cold or they've got out of the habit is not acceptable. I want you to be the salt. I want you to be the sand. I want you to rub people the wrong way. Do not give them an explanation of, I understand. Do not protect their privacy. Be willing to confront people with the gospel of Jesus Christ. Be willing to confront people with the responsibilities of church membership. I'd rather for 1,000 people get mad and leave this church than for 1,000 people to stay at home on Sunday morning and watch television. So God is saying to us, I want you to sit up, take notice. Here's the rules. Secondly, you need to know the Son. Verse 2, the Lord our God made a covenant with us at Horeb. It was not with our fathers that the Lord made this covenant, but with us, with all of us who are alive here today. The Lord spoke to you face to face out of the fire at the mountain. Verse 6, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. Now, Mount Horeb is a place where God signed the original contract in stone. And Mount Calvary is where Jesus re-signed it in blood. This is God's abiding word. And the basic idea of the commandments is that there's a relational flow between God and sinners. That our lives are messed up by sin. And that sin has to be filtered through Jesus Christ and returns to us from God in the form of grace. We prayed for a miracle in Lenora Barber's life, and that miracle was so needed because her liver was non-functioning, which meant that even though the rest of her body was perfect, there was nothing within her body to filter the impurities, and she was going to die. Apart from Jesus Christ to filter our impurities, we are going to die in our sin. And if you can tell yourself that about yourself or about your spouse or about your brother or your sister or your mother or your father, then you'll get serious. You'll be less likely to be concerned about offending them and more likely to be concerned about witnessing to them. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. And you see, his plan is still that he would bring us out of captivity and lead us to the promised land. And the only way that happens is through Jesus Christ, God's Son. My son had an experience of sharing the purpose of Christmas. One of the guys that he works with is not a believer. And Billy invited him to have lunch and said, I want to give you a book. And so later Billy was telling me how it went, and the guy said, first thing he said was, it's a Christian book, isn't it?